Welcome, and another welcome. That's right, welcome to the 19th episode of the Talent Intelligence Collective podcast. No major break this time, we're actually fully on the case, powering episodes out at an incredible, for us, rate of around one a month again. It's exhausting just thinking about it. Anyhow, in this one, me, Alan Walker, Alison Ettridge and Toby Culshaw co-hosted an episode where we spoke to Teresa Wykes of technology behemoth SAP. In the news bit, we covered off topics such as labour market trends, Microsoft boosting pay and start, Apple losing staff due to its return to office policy, and Gen Z workers, Gen Z for our UK friends, craving career stability. And in the Teresa bit, we talked about her role at SAP, obviously, how she got to where she is through a variety of career experiences, how being from a commercial background has helped with her success, SAP's version of talent intelligence, and measuring the consumption of the work that talent intelligence outputs, and a ton more. Some really, really good stuff. So, get listening, get learning, and stay intelligent, folks. Have fun! Before we get on with the main event, I just wanted to remind you that this podcast is proudly sponsored by our friends at Stratagens, and here's a very well-spoken chap to tell you a little bit more about them.
Stratagens gives HR leaders the data they need to transform businesses with the speed and ease required in today's world. If you're ready to make decisions that aren't lengthy, costly, one-dimensional, or based on gut feeling, visit stratagens.com. That's stratagens.com to register for a Wednesday demo drop-in and find out more.
Hello, I'm Alan Walker, and welcome to episode 19 of the Talent Intelligence Collective podcast.
Yay!
We're back on track. You may well have noticed that there's 2 podcasts in 2 months. But, as ever, expect one of our famous hiatuses soon. Anyhow, I'm joined on the show by my usual co-host, Toby Culshaw of Amazon, Alison Ettridge of Talent Intuition. Say hello, guys.
Hello.
Hello.
Hello. And of course, we have with us a guest, not just any guest, but a lovely, wonderful guest. It's Teresa Wykes of SAP. Teresa, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
No problem at all. For those of our listeners that might not know you, can you give us a quick intro as to who it is you are and what you do, please?
Yes, of course. So I work at SAP, Alan, and I look after the global talent intelligence function, and I've been there for a couple of years.
Excellent. Thank you. And again, it's brilliant to have you on the podcast. Me and Toby and Alison, and of course, all of our listeners are looking forward to hearing more about you and your work. For any new listeners out there, a quick reminder about the running order. In just a minute, Toby's going to take us through some of the news, some of the stuff that's happening in the world of talent intelligence, and we'll have a discussion around that. And then Alison is going to put on her interviewing hat and fire some questions at Teresa about talent intelligence in her world. And as usual, I'll probably go on mute for a bit and just kind of listen in and drop in about 40 minutes' time and close the show out. So let's do this thing. What's happening in the world, Toby?
So we're going to start off with an article, a new report from the ILO, so the International Labour Organization, talking on the very happy note of the fact that the global labour market recovery is going into reverse. So that's not ideal. So although they found there were significant gains during the last quarter of 2021, the number of hours worked globally has dropped in Q1 2022 to 3.8% below pre-crisis benchmark, which was the fourth quarter of 2019. So essentially, it's not, as a global labour market, going in the direction we want it to be going. We're not getting up to where we were even previously, let alone kind of getting back on track to any kind of growth. 3.8% doesn't sound like a huge amount, but when we put that into kind of real world terms, it's the equivalent of a deficit of 112 million full-time jobs. And obviously, we're seeing increasing inequalities between and within countries as well, and between industries, as we've discussed previously. So pretty huge amount that's being impacted by and impacting across the world. So definitely something to keep an eye on, but we're not pushing forward quite at the rate we'd like to be pushing forward at as a global labour market.
Yeah, I thought this one was interesting. I guess there were 2 things that struck me. The first of all was that we're continuing to see this divergence and an increasing divergence between rich and poor economies. And that remains, and in some cases is getting worse. And that's despite the global workforce and the fact that lots of businesses are doing remote working or hybrid working or work from anywhere. So I guess that's, there's still something therefore that needs addressing in that point. But the other bit for me that was really interesting was that this report looks at the connection between inflation, financial markets, debt, and supply chain, and the impact, and war, and therefore the impact on the labour market. And that fully rounded approach, I know I've harped on about it a lot in the past, but that joining the dots between all of those, it's why we include all of those data points and strategies, because you've got to look holistically when you're looking at labour markets to see the external influences. So, yeah, interesting report. We're not quite where we need to be. And clearly a long way to go, particularly in trying to drive some equality in the economies of the global workforce.
Yeah, completely agree. And your point around kind of that holistic view was something that John Ferguson, practice lead of New Globalization at The Economist Impact, he was speaking at an event over at Davos that Adecco are running, the impact of talent scarcity on the future of work. And really good event. We'll get the replay put on the show notes. Really interesting. Whole event was really good. But John was highlighting that in different regions, the recovery rate is varying quite dramatically. And although certain regions are edging towards pre-COVID levels, they're not up at the pre-COVID growth forecast level. So we haven't kind of caught up with ourselves quite yet. But also then the disparity between regions, particularly Europe with the war going on in Ukraine, and then obviously China and the supply chain impact of that. Some really huge impacts and the difference region to region, and then obviously as the ILO highlighted, even sub-region depending on the industries, etc. Yeah, really, really interesting contextual stuff coming through.
I haven't had a chance to listen to that yet, but I'm looking forward to it. I think it'll be a good session by all accounts.
Yep, definitely worth a listen. Definitely worth a listen. What else is going on? So a couple of other bits that were quite interesting. So Microsoft are looking to boost pay and stock compensation to retain employees. It's nearly doubling its budget to try and help with that. Some workers are getting up to 25%. We're equally seeing Infosys offering salary hikes of up to 25% to high potential employees due to limited talent pools in artificial intelligence, cloud computing, data science, usual sort of suspects there, really. And then also looking to kind of help other high proposed as well in other fields up to 12, 13% as well. So we're definitely seeing this instability where tech talent is still very high demand, lots of salary increases, lots of companies putting their hand in their pocket to make sure they get the tech talent they need. But then that being really at odds with the overall labour market that's seeing a bit less stability and struggling a little bit more. So definitely seeing some really interesting moves there across different tech companies.
I think there were some pieces that came out to me in both of those articles, actually. So the Microsoft one, which also refers to Amazon, which I'll probably be able to talk about, you might not be able to.
Many thanks.
But that's okay. So the Microsoft one I thought was interesting was that actually, and Infosys, all of the focus on those, and actually Amazon, was all really about retention and not necessarily about attraction. And I thought that that's quite interesting. And I wondered whether, through the Microsoft lens in particular, there was this focus on early to mid careers and this focus on retention. And I just thought, I wonder whether or not businesses have finally worked out that the cost of an empty seat and the cost of replacement will be more than any increases that they have to put in their salary or their stock option pots. I just thought that was quite interesting. And then from an Amazon perspective, there was also reference to the 2-year sign-on bonus. So again, about retention rather than necessarily about attraction. And then the Infosys piece, I think we can do separately because we can talk about some of the attrition rates there, which I think was quite interesting. The only bit that came across to me was, as someone who is scaling a tech software business, the new graduate software engineer, granted this came from Glassdoor, so I don't know how robust the data was. They were talking about $163,000 as a salary. I was like, oh!
What?
Yeah.
Wow.
I know. For a new graduate software engineer. Now, I don't know if that was package, or what it was, but that's what it referred to in the article. I was like, oh my God, none of us can compete in a market none of us can compete on salary in a market that's that bonkers, right? So it was okay. So maybe we need to be looking at how else we're competing with some of these organisations.
I think we're living in a time of just complete carnage and anarchy about pay, actually. And I mean, I understand why, but it does make me wonder about the salary survey companies and actually how they're adapting their offerings in order to, because I used to work in reward years and years ago. And there was always a very structured approach to, how you pay people, how you can give people a pay rise, annual comp reviews, things like that. But I mean, how are they, bearing in mind that they're a very valid talent intelligence tool, how are they even sort of keeping track of all of this? I think it's extraordinary.
I'm completely with you. We touched on it, funny enough, a couple of weeks ago, and I was saying that, the challenge in today's market is, so people are constantly saying constructions give us robust salary data, and I'm constantly saying no, it can't, because it's not, it's kind of not our bag. But in order for data to be robust around salaries, it needs to be historical. Mm-hmm. And in today's market, if it's historical, it's out of date, by tomorrow. And so you're like, oh, okay, and then. But the market is moving so quickly, right, that people have got to have a handle on it. And I think, what's interesting is that increasingly we're hearing TA teams and talent intelligence teams saying, look, whether or not that is what company X is paying or not, it is what we are hearing from candidates as they're coming through the door. And therefore, we have got to be in a position to, compete with what we are hearing, if we want to be able to keep those people coming in through the door. And I just think it's really, really tough to produce anything that is robust and likely to stand up at the moment. Toby, can we do the emphasis piece? Can I do that separately?
Yeah, jump into it. Go for it.
Well, so I was just interested. I don't know whether either of you can talk about this, but they talked about their attrition rates. They talked about their attrition rates being 27.7%. TCS, a Tata consultancy service, was 17.4%, and Wipro was 23.8%. And ignoring TCS, all of those seemed really extraordinarily high, even in today's market.
Was that for the last year, Alison, or over a longer period?
It was for the last 2 quarters, I think.
Really? Right. Okay.
I know. It just I just thought it was like, ugh. And then the other thing that I thought was quite interesting was they talked about hiring 85,000 freshers and 50,000 graduates. And these numbers, they're mind-boggling, aren't they? In any organisation of that size, as they are in SAP and as they are in Amazon. But I was trying to figure that out. I was going, okay, so 50,000 graduates probably means that you've got to interview 200,000 people. And it probably means you need about 1 million applicants. And I'm making some massive assumptions there, but I was just kind of going through that scale and thinking, my God, how could talent intelligence impact on making that a more efficient process all the way through? So, I thought that was a really cool one. Toby, I don't know whether you've got anything to add to that at all.
No, I think you're more eloquent than me as always, but I think those kind of attrition rates, particularly given the markets that emphasis play in, I'm not surprised given both the functional and the geographical. They're both hyper competitive markets, so I'm not surprised by those figures, and I think they're probably quite in keeping with other tech focused firms in those markets. To be honest, I think that kind of low to mid 20s seems to be where a lot of companies are kind of sitting at for the last 12, 18 months. I agree. The numbers are just mind-boggling. Absolutely mind-boggling. The thought process of recruiting 50,000 college graduates melts my brain a little bit, and hats off to anyone that owns that stuff. That's mental to me.
It is, isn't it? I'm just completely... And I don't know whether or not my sums were right or not, but I was thinking, probably a 25% hit rate, so 200,000, and then how many people? 20% from applicant through. I was like, God, that's 1 million people. That's 1 million applicants. For all that people may like or not like AI and screening, there's got to be an argument for doing something in that space.
Oh, you'd have to, wouldn't you? Yeah. I know Tesco's at the beginning of the pandemic, they had something like 1.3 million applications in the space of 2 months.
Wow.
For roles at Tesco's. And I think the vast majority of that was dealt with by AI, and I think it was almost a go through a process and then you're offered a role piece, pretty much technology powering it all the way through.
Wow, that's very cool.
Because again, you can't interview 1.3 million people, can you?
No.
And you've got to actually be really ruthless with your tech.
Yeah, it's really interesting in terms of the space of, I think, volume, isn't it? It's very different in other areas, but in volume, it's particularly interesting. Anyway,
absolutely, without a doubt. So what else is happening, Toby?
Do you know, I've put some bits that I kind of noted around some talent movements. So Apple lost some senior folks, Ian Goodfellow specifically, who was director of Apple's machine learning division. He's left to go back to Google, and because he came from there previously. But he cited specifically as the return to office policy was the reason for his departure. And I think this is something we've kind of touched on previously as well, where I think companies are going to have to really tread carefully. I think particularly if we're looking at a tougher economic market moving ahead, and companies may feel the need to come in more strongly and force return to office a bit harder. I think they've got to be really careful, because people want flexibility now. They want the option. Some want to go to the office, some want to be remote. But by and large, if you tell either group they have to do one or the other, it's going to have that knee-jerk reaction. So I think companies got to be quite smart about how they play this and be as flexible as possible, because I think there's going to be lots more movement around the talent labor market around this kind of return to office scenario and what's optional versus what's forced.
I'm going to resurface. Do you remember I wrote the new ecosystem of work, this white paper about the maturity curve and the relationship between workforce and workplace, and I wrote it before the pandemic, and we launched it. But and I'm going to resurface it, because actually what we talked about in the maturity curve was those organisations that are going to be ahead of the curve are those where you're not looking through the lens of a role or through the lens of a workforce, but that you're breaking down a role into tasks. And what you're then saying is actually we'll match the tasks to the place that's best suited for that task to be done. Because actually, if you need some headspace and you need some quiet, that's not necessarily the office is the right space to be doing it. But if you're doing something collaborative, then it needs to be in a space where there's lots of different people. I think I might resurface that and just see it's still kind of, just make sure it's still my view, but I think it is, even 3 years on.
Sounds very relevant. I think you should.
We'll find out when I do. I might even use Jasper to rewrite it.
Shh, we're not allowed to talk about Jasper.
Oh, sorry.
That's Jasper Carrot for anyone listening, just in case you're wondering. Okay.
They don't talk about Bruno. I feel like breaking into song now, but nobody wants that.
No.
There's quite a lot happening, Toby. I remember you telling us there was a number of articles. What else is happening out there?
Gen Z workers crave career stability. Apparently, there was a survey of 1,000 US adults who are going to be graduating 2020, 21, 22, etc., etc. But what the real kind of key messaging coming through is because of the whole kind of aftermath of the pandemic and it's all being so unstable, stability is going to be key for them, which was Ria Moss, Director of Data Insights and Customer Intelligence at iCIMS, was telling Axios. This generation is being very particular about the company they want to work for until they have to bring their whole true self to work. So for me, it was kind of two messages there. It's the stability, but it's the stability in a very transparent and open and inclusive environment. And for me, that's almost two different messages as well. I think you can have career stability, but not have that inclusive environment. But I think, the message coming through is, people want to be able to be themselves at work, which is great. I think that's just a Gen Z thing. I'm going to be honest. I think if they extended that, I think most people would want to be able to bring their true self to work. So, messages coming through that Gen Z, it's definitely a piece they're going to be focusing on.
Absolutely. I think that true self at work thing, there's so many studies that shows it takes up so much emotional and intellectual energy to be anything other than your true self that you're not fulfilling your true potential or capacity, are you? Because you're spending 20% of your energy on being what an organization wants you to be, rather than being who you are and letting your personality shine. So I'm not surprised by that. And I spoke to, I don't think you guys know, Steve Ward from Universum, the big employer brand consulting business. They been doing a similar survey, actually, but said almost exactly the same thing, that there's been a massive shift of graduates and people, other early in career types, who are no longer what used to be perceived as being flighty, looking to move jobs every 18 months or so. They're actually going back to looking for that long-term career within an organisation, that stability and the likelihood that the organisation isn't going to go kaput. So suddenly the larger employers who are perceived to be more stable are suddenly much more attractive to younger folk. God, that makes me sound old. The youngsters of today.
Oh, like that when you were a lad, was it?
Oh, no, it wasn't. I think that's all the news, isn't it, Toby?
Well, it is ish. I just wanted to circle back. I mentioned very briefly earlier the whole piece over at Davos, the impact of talent scarcity and the future of work. There was another section on that where it was more of a panel discussion, and it had Ellen Shuk, the Chief Leadership and HRO over at Accenture, Eric Bridjolfsson, whose name I probably murdered. Apologies, Eric. Director of Stanford Digital Economy Lab. Alan Murray, Chief Executive of Fortune Media, and Alain Dehaze, Chief Exec of the Adecco Group. But it was Ellen that particularly kind of caught my mind from Accenture on a couple of points you mentioned. One was around skills taxonomy. And she said that the whole of Accenture had a full and complete skills talent card within Workday. So at any given moment, they could see a full skills taxonomy across the entire organization, see any skills gaps, see any kind of movement towards the future, which I thought was phenomenal. I hadn't ever heard of a company at that size, that scale, having such a clear visibility on their overall skills within their workforce in such a way. And it was both highlighting the skills, the skill level within, and also how frequently and how recently the skills were used, which was quite interesting. I found that quite impressive, and obviously opens itself up for whole heaps of fun from a people analytics and a TI perspective. So I like that. But I also like that they highlighted that during this whole kind of transitional period and the last year, they'd actually onboarded 100,000 people into the metaverse, that they're really invested heavily in the whole VR and the metaverse side of things. And they actually deployed 60,000 Oculus headsets to staff, which was huge, absolutely huge. And I know Accenture often do play in these spaces and try things out. And obviously they look to roll out some customers, etc. But it's the first company I'd seen really looking into the metaverse that heavily, that fast, and really investing in it, which I think leads a whole heap of questions around kind of inclusivity and how you can work from in a D&I environment, bring your true self to work, as we mentioned, because suddenly you can have an avatar that truly reflects what you are and what you want to be perceived as, rather than what you may be on a day-to-day. But then comes right through to, well, actually 50% or so of people feel seasick from them or motion sickness from them. So it's a really interesting concept, and kind of how it's going to play through, I have no idea, but I love to hear Accenture talking about
it. Call me cynical, but I imagine part of that is also preparing Accenture to consult with and advise other businesses on the metaverse, because they'll be able to go, hey, we've got 60,000 of our employees already knocking around there. We know this stuff. We've done it ourselves. We can advise you. So it's a really smart play, without a doubt.
I would be very surprised if they didn't.
Alison, you're a big fan of VR, aren't you?
Oh, no, can't. And anything like that, it makes me vomit almost instantly. Just like, oh my, put the headset on and then the floor starts moving. Just I can't even do the twirly things at fairgrounds, never mind stick on headsets and have some weird environment around me. I quite like, but then what I do think is interesting, if I'm more sensible about this, is there's something quite interesting about the dichotomy of having an avatar that is Alison, that isn't really me, and then actually wanting to bring your true self to work. And what that means, and hopefully we'll talk with Teresa and him much more from Teresa in a minute. But I used to work with Teresa, so she's seen the Alison true self and could well want to see an avatar of Alison again. It could be less stroppy.
Well, on that note, I think it's probably time to chat a little bit more with Teresa. we've heard a little bit of her view on what's happening out there in the news, but let's hear a little bit more about her own work. Alison, up you step.
Well, no, not me. It's Teresa up you step, really. Teresa, thank you for agreeing to be on. I think it's always like, thank you. It's slightly weird, I think, because we know each other. So actually, this feels more unusual for me than normal when we're doing these podcasts. But what we haven't touched on, you really kindly talked about what you're doing at SAP when you first gave your intro, but you haven't touched about your background at all. And I think one of the things that's really interesting about your background is the fact that you have done lots of consulting work, and therefore you've got this breadth of experience. So can you summarize for the listeners a little bit about your background, and then perhaps we can touch a bit on what you think the breadth of consulting brings to the role?
Yeah, definitely. So I started my career back in the 90s in investment banking. And I was a compensation analyst, which was quite a racy role at the time. It was in reward. And then I moved to a comp and ben consultancy and did a few years there. Then I went to Spain, did something totally different for a few years. And then when I came back, I did a couple of roles in exec search, but the big bulk of my career was at Armstrong Craven, where I essentially had a sort of sales solution definition role. And we were working with huge amounts of clients, huge breadth, and got some really, really great experience there. And I think probably and SAP was a client of mine at the time. They poached me over to the other side, which was a really great move for me. I was 10 years at Armstrong Craven. I think probably the biggest thing that the consultancy background gives you is that exposure to the external market. Just because you have such a range of experiences, you get to see what a good TA function looks like. You get to see where others are in their evolution. And I think having quite a balanced view, and particularly joining a very big company like SAP with quite a long service culture and quite an internal hiring culture, I think that was the value that me joining was able to bring, was that external view.
And it's interesting, isn't it? We've talked on the show before about the need for anyone in the world of talent intelligence, particularly in-house, to be crafting a solution to a business challenge, and making sure that you're reflecting back on that solution. And I think what a consultancy background gives you is a laser sharp focus on what is the problem and what is the solution, which I think you bring to the table in SAP.
I think so. Also, I think, Alison, I come from a very commercial background as well. So, you have to be efficient. You have to, every hour counts. There's always sort of the commercial view on your shoulder. So, which is good, but again, very different from joining from the environment in a very large internal TA function. So yeah, it felt culturally quite different.
Very different. Yeah. Okay. Can you talk to us a little bit? We waffle on about what on earth talent intelligence is, and I think I think it depends on who you are, right? So can you talk to us about what your version of talent intelligence is in SAP?
Yes, I'd be very happy to, and I'm glad that we talk about versions, because I think talent intelligence is so many different things for so many people, and there is no one version, and that whole conversation can get quite unnecessary at times. But basically, our version of talent intelligence is entirely aligned to what's happening in the business right now at SAP. So what's happening in the business is the move to cloud, and what that means for talent is that for the first time, the business is having to look externally more than ever, and also it's an educational process. So our version of talent intelligence is probably primarily, I would say, educational. But what we're doing is providing talent and competitor data to help the business make better decisions. And importantly and efficiently, not to repeat any work that's being done elsewhere in the business or even in TA, because obviously we're quite big. So efficiency is important. But that version of talent intelligence didn't always start off like that. I mean, if I think a couple of years ago when I joined, it looked a bit different. We've since evolved the model to take account of what's been consumed as well, because I think a lot of talent intelligence can kind of get produced and then, put away in a drawer and never looked at again. And for me, it was always important that the version that we were doing was going to be consumed and, by the greatest number of people. So it will change again. But yeah, that's sort of where we are today.
That's very
sorry to interrupt, Alison. How do you measure that consumption, Teresa?
Oh God, that's such a massive question.
Sorry.
So right at the beginning, we would always find out who's going to use it, who's going to see it, who are the stakeholders, what's the aim of the project. So we kind of do that reverse engineering right at the beginning before we even agree to do the project, because I think a lot of people think that they want data about something, but actually can it be got? Is the data any good? Is it sustainable? So we'd always do quite a lot of feasibility in terms of what the request was, and I would, again, that's probably my consulting background, I'd always go quite hardcore on the detail in terms of what was valid and what wasn't. Measuring consumability. I mean, we've got KPIs in terms of the team, in terms of that consumption. It's mostly talking to the business about how they used it and what they used it for,
makes sense.
And whether it met their needs.
Because you do see some organisations, not necessarily related specifically to TI, but in organisations where you will have senior leaders where they'll go, get me data on this, that and the other. It could be anything. It could be finance, it could be HR, it could be ops. And often so much time and effort goes into gathering that data, maybe giving some insights across. And then, to your point, person who's requested it looks at it, it never goes further than that individual, and it has no impact. It does nothing, and it's nothing meaningful. So I think your approach is really powerful, that it's about, okay, it's worth us doing this. Is it going to get used? Is it actually going to drive change in the business or drive decision making in the business? So I like that. It's really good.
Yeah, we also we have quite a strong a lot of our talent intelligence has to be quite candidate driven, because we're making thousands of hires a year. So the work that we do has to add value to that process ultimately. So we're not tasked on making hires or closing down recs, but we do keep an eye on whether the talent that we originate leads to a hire, or actually how far that talent is socialized in the business. So the consumption at a candidate level or at a talent level, an individual person level, is measured in terms of how far that individual travels into the organization, whether that's to talent attraction or to the business for a socialization meeting.
Excellent, thank you.
That's very cool, because that includes some of the qualitative research that I know that you and your team are really big on and good at. Do you talk about cost avoidance when you're positioning internally?
Not really, Alison. I mean, we occasionally, but not. And I in the back of my mind, I always, out of habit, would probably cost a project, as part of the project plan, particularly when I'm looking at, resourcing it. But to be honest with you, the model is so different in-house than it is externally. It kind of, you would never cast a project in the same way if you were in an agency as if you were in-house, because you wouldn't have the same resources. You work in a different way. You've got different skills and capabilities available to you. Also, in a consultancy environment, you're paid to get going super quickly and to mobilize that project immediately. Whereas in-house, you can't. You've got stakeholders that you're reliant on. I think there's a different set of behaviours that start the engagement internally than externally. So it can be helpful, but I don't think it's ultimately that useful.
Really,
does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. It makes perfect sense. I think it's quite interesting in terms of some of the positioning when you talk about what the version of talent intelligence is for SAP and how it's positioned, actually that plays through, doesn't it? In some organisations, actually talent intelligence has to talk about, we are a cost avoidance function, and this is what you would be spending if you were going externally, and really are quite, I want to say quite commercial, but that sounds like you're not, and that's not what I'm saying at all. But they're quite sort of consultancy and project led in their outlook, whereas it feels like it's much more strategic and much more of a function that is helping to drive business and business growth within SAP.
Yeah, I think that's fair. And I think also, a company the size of SAP and the resources it has and the brand that it has, it should have a talent intelligence function.
Yeah.
It's part of the best practice HR model. When you get down to the version that we do, then obviously that changes. But yeah, to me, talent intelligence was always actually common sense. I don't see it as something super luxurious. Actually, I think it's for me it's kind of essential. We're big part of what we're doing is treating talent like customers, which is what most big companies are doing anyway. They're just doing it with products. So I sort of feel that talent intelligence has become a little bit fetishized, but it probably shouldn't be. And I think that's probably something to do. So I'm getting a bit deep here, but it's probably something to do with, the way that talent attraction or the status that talent attraction has as a profession. Perhaps it's interesting.
Yeah, it's really interesting, and it's not deep at all. I think I'm going to steal "fetishize" as a word, though. I'm going to have to learn how to pronounce it first of all. Can you give us a sense of the volume of work that your team, and then the size of your team? Actually, that would be really interesting.
Yeah. So there's 30 in the team. We are nearly at full capacity at the moment, not quite nearly. So we're 30. We're split about 2/3 and 1/3 between the talent engagement teams. So they're the ones that work on the professional level roles in terms of pipelining. And then I have a global research team who do things like succession management and competitor research projects, more of the kind of insight stuff. In terms of the volume of work, we're always busy. The team are working on the engagement teams are probably working on a sort of broad. Well, this year it's all about working on sales talent actually, and mostly diverse sales talent. So that keeps them very busy because that's quite researchy. And that kind of work is fairly routine. On the research side, we've got a list of active projects. We've got a kind of rainy day list of projects as well, and then we've got a pipeline list of projects. So there's plenty coming through all the time.
I get a sense from our previous conversations actually, but also from today, that actually a lot of the work that you are delivering is really it's the qualitative research, it's the overlay, it's the so what. Whereas in other organisations, what we might find TI is very data led, and it's just here's some numbers and then the so what. Is that a fair observation? Is that actually the team is really focused, as well as data, but on the qualitative research and the secondary research?
Yeah, certainly the global research team, so separate from the engagement team, yes, they are. But actually, most of that qualitative research comes out of talking to talent.
Yeah.
So, the research team do a huge amount of succession management work. So we own external succession management at SAP. We do a lot of work with the board in terms of showcasing talent to them, both behind the curtain and then actually engaging with that talent, bring it into the business for meetings. So when you're talking to talent at that level and you're having a certain kind of conversation, you do get a lot of insight.
Yes.
So the qualitative bit and the difficult bit is actually putting that into a report and reporting on the findings. But like I said earlier, you could do that till the cows come home, and actually all you're doing really is you need an attentive audience for that, because we can have 25 conversations, come up with some really interesting insight, try and share that insight, but if it's not on our stakeholders' agenda, there's no point in doing it. So the way to their hearts is through sort of pragmatic relationship brokering, if you like, which is essentially engagement and socialization with the talent, and then giving them guidance about what to talk to with that talent. So that's where we add value, is this kind of this educational and sort of coaching capability. So when we present a profile to the business, we'll often highlight areas that the business could talk about in order to turn this person's head based on the conversation that we've had. So again, we're just trying to make it as consumable as possible.
I love that. Where did you start? So when you first joined, and here we are setting up, we want you to really come in and set up this function. Where did you start? How did you go about hiring? And what are you hiring for?
So when we start, so I joined to lead the European team, and then I took over the global role just over a year ago. But I think that the hiring remit has has sort of been the same throughout. So I think I learned that we it's quite difficult to repurpose talent into talent intelligence because it didn't allow us to differentiate the skills. So I kind of learned quite quickly what capability we had and what capability we needed to get externally. And it very quickly became clear that we probably did need to look in the outside market for that talent. I hired some of my previous colleagues, which is no secret. I also hired from elsewhere though as well. I was always keen to have a lot of diversity. And now, I mean, if I'm hiring, I have a sort of definitely. I'm not necessarily looking for people with experience in talent intelligence, because that's actually quite hard to find. And as we've been talking, there's so many different versions. I would always relate it to the outputs and then work back for the skills that we need. So, for example, if we ever go down the route of splitting up the team into service lines, such as, one team's looking after succession, one team's looking after competitor insights, another team's looking after location. I would build it backwards from there. But generally, we're not doing that yet. But generally speaking, I would always look for. If we're talking sort of, personal attributes, I would always look for curiosity and definitely tenacity. And a lot of this work, as we all know, it's quite tedious. It's quite repetitive. It needs patience. It needs tenacity. So, rigor and attention span. People who read stuff, I think that's really, really overlooked, actually. Just people who are familiar with, they're interested in the world. They read things. People who can write as well. I have a very, very talented team, but we have varying writing skills in the team as well, and that's something that's quite important. People who understand an audience, that's really important, because back to this consumability thing, they need to be able to understand that. But people who are just quite adaptable, I think, and quite resilient, such perfection, basically.
I was just thinking, God, I'm glad. Toby and I toyed quite often with maybe we should set up a recruitment agency for talent intelligence professionals. It's just, and then I listened to that as a spec. I'm thinking, let's never do that.
No, I mean it's interesting. You've got to be creative, and I've talked to lots of people about this because it's hard, and it's really hard at the moment. Yeah. I think that we've got a lot of really good ex-recruiters in the team. But they're the ones that can kind of see around the corner, and a lot of it is in that curiosity and just the interest. They're interested in people. They're interested in people's careers, actually, because you've got when you're doing what we do, you've got to be able to advise people to a certain extent. So you need to be able to talk about that. We do a lot of it. Sorry, Alison.
No, keep going.
No, we do. We love to hire a lot of early talent, actually. I mean, it's a really great grounding, I think, for people early in their careers, because you've got such a breadth of exposure, and such a broad range of skills that you have access to. And also, if you're freshly out of university or school, the chances are you would have been doing quite a lot of research anyway. So you're quite close to that, methodology or that methodological way of working. In fact, Max, who's my intern at the moment, he told me that he thinks he's got the best gig out of everyone at SAP on the interns because, he's actually working on proper projects. Whereas, he says some of his fellow interns are not. But I don't know about that. But I do think it's a great career to get into because also we're very lucky at SAP. We've got a nice hotline to some very senior people, so you get that exposure very early on.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think it's really interesting. We recorded a podcast. I'm not going to give away the secrets, but we recorded, as Alan said, we're back on track. We've done a couple in a couple of weeks, and with this particular individual, we were talking about the neurodiversity in a team, but it was linked to the creativity that we were talking about. And in this team, there were a whole bunch of musicians, and I just thought it was really interesting that it's kind of, that's so tied to being creative and thinking differently.
Yes,
and
you're so right.
Yeah.
No, you're so right, and I've noticed this. So yeah, we have musicians in the team as well, and yeah, it's fascinating, and I think it's that curiosity and it's that interest, a certain type of energy, isn't it, about what you bring to your work? Yeah, no, I've noticed that too.
And it's something about having the time, isn't it? So sitting down and taking the time and letting brain, sensitive creativity, whatever you want to call it, run, and then thinking about that. And I think that's so interesting. I always think on the Talent Intelligence WhatsApp group. So anyone who's listening who's not on the WhatsApp group wants to join, ask Toby, because it is a mine of information from some very, very intelligent people and practitioners. But I always think that whenever I'm looking through the group, I'm almost jealous is the wrong word, but I'm jealous of the time that people can have to look at some of the reports that are in there and think, God, you learn so much from reading different reports and that breadth of experience. I think it's fascinating.
And also, Teresa, it's good to hear you've got musicians, because I think now we're going away from maybe forming a Talent Intelligence band, Alison, to maybe a full-blown orchestra.
Maybe a choir, Talent Intelligence choir.
I was singing the Jungle Book earlier. I'm not sure that sits in choir category, if I'm honest. I think I should be excluded from anything related to that. I've got a couple more questions, only two more. So I think the first one for me is, can you do a quick do's and don'ts for somebody who's building a team in this space now, Teresa?
Gosh, yes, I think just, do be clear about your version of talent intelligence. Make sure it fits the business. I would say it doesn't actually need to be that sophisticated. If you're setting up a talent intelligence function from scratch, you don't sort of think it's got to be super intelligent just because it's got the word intelligence in it. Actually, you can provide insights that are quite basic but quite profound and quite impactful. I treat it like a startup. That's what we did. We went out, we marketed it. We were very aware of our risks. We're very clear to say to the business what we're not here for. What else? Oh yeah, brand your outputs in quite a unique way. That's something that we do. So when we're presenting profiles, we make them look quite different because again, it makes it quite memorable. And we're trying to create, the familiarity with the business, so that when they see one of our profiles, they know what's coming.
That's fantastic, as advice. But actually, you're so right. Thinking about it as a startup creates a very different lens to it. You're thinking about branding, you're thinking about selling, you're thinking about positioning, you're thinking about risk in a very different way to, I've just come in to set up a function. And then final question for me, and I don't know if anyone will have any more afterwards, but final question for me would be, what's next for Talent Intelligence and SAP?
I think we're 2 and a bit years in now. I think we're probably more than ever now in a fairly sort of steadier state. I think it's really more about consumption now. I think we probably, I'm not sure what the plans are to expand the team, but if we did, then we could permeate the business even more. I think most of us having joined in lockdown and, SAP being such a vast company, it takes time. So, year 3 is probably the year of, bedding in. I think we could always work on our consulting and our advisory skills. I'd like to become an ever more trusted partner to the business. I'd like us to have some fun, some more fun. We do have a lot of fun. But actually, now that we can start seeing each other a bit more, I think that's where the fun can get going. And we've been lucky enough to see each other a bit in the last few weeks. So that's been great. So that will mean that the work probably starts to feel a bit different because we can, start to meet in person and work in person. I think that'll make quite a difference. So this year will feel quite different. I think the business is getting used to us. So, we're finessing what we're doing and just seeing what's coming at us and how we need to adapt. So it won't be predictable, but I think I can certainly see what's coming for the next few months.
How exciting. And we're back to fun. So there we are. We're going to have a TI band led by the gang at SAP. Love it.
Excellent. And on that note, we should meet Teresa again in maybe 12 months' time and find out of those what's coming next stuff, what's landed, and the impact of those. But folks, I think we're going to have to call time. That was wonderful, Teresa. Thanks so much. But I am going to do my fun police thing and call us to an end. We need to probably release you back into the wild, so to speak. It's been great having you on the podcast. But how was it for you?
Oh, it was great. Thank you for having me. I feel honoured to be a guest.
Oh, don't be silly. We're honoured to have you as a guest. No, it's fantastic. And thank you again. And I always do a big thanks to our listeners, the usual stuff. Thanks for listening. Thanks for supporting us. Thanks for telling your friends about us. Keep doing that. It's really important that the word gets out there about the podcast. And without you guys, we don't really have a podcast. It'd just be 4 people sat around a virtual table having a nice little old chat. So keep telling everyone about us. And if you haven't got any friends, join the Talent Intelligence Collective Facebook group, because you will have a lot of friends in there and you can get to meet some even lovelier people. So anyway, stay intelligent, folks, and thanks. Thanks for listening. Before you go, I wanted for the last time to remind you about our generous sponsors, Stratagens. Here's that posh chap again, telling you about their fabulous product.
Stratagens gives HR leaders the data they need to transform businesses with the speed and ease required in today's world. If you're ready to make decisions that aren't lengthy, costly, one-dimensional, or based on gut feeling, visit stratagens.com. That's stratagens.com to register for a Wednesday demo drop-in and find out more.